Groove. Can we welcome, please, Jonathan Scott?
Hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you for that nice welcome. Thank you, Tim. Oh, it's so nice to be back here. It's such a beautiful place. Yes, hello, I'm Jonathan. I'm going to talk to you about the first few decades of recorded sound, play you some of the weird sounds we have from those first few decades, and then tell you a little bit about how the story played out locally. What you're seeing there is a clip from Edison the Man, film from 1940 with Spencer Tracy, which tells the eureka moment of sound. But I'm going to skip it on because we're short of time. There we go. Right, that's the room where sound was first recorded and played back. That's in Menlo Park, New Jersey. That man there is Thomas Edison. And in 1876, the telephone was invented by Alexander Graham Bell, and that lot had been given quite a lot of money to come up with their own non-infringing version of the telephone. So that's what they were working on. And one day in July 1877, Thomas Edison had the mouthpiece of a telephone in his hand, and he was just sort of singing and shouting into it and feeling the way the diaphragm vibrated against the palm of his hand. And he turned to his chief engineer, Charles Batchelor, who's that man there right next to him with the moustache, and said, if we got a point on this diaphragm and then pulled some kind of recording material beneath it while we spoke, it should preserve our speech. And they all thought, that should work. So they rigged up this. It's called a strip phonograph. And basically, as you can see, it's a sort of mouthpiece. There's a little spike. This here is paraffin paper, which is wax-covered paper. This was July 18th, 1877, so the anniversary is tomorrow. And he pulled through the paper and went, hello, hello, into the mouthpiece. And when he pulled through the paper again, he didn't get a perfect hello, hello, but it was a recognizable sort of buzzing that told him they had managed to preserve sound waves. And then that day he wrote some notes saying have recorded sound waves. Yeah, isn't that exciting? Now they couldn't drop everything and just make this work because they had to concentrate on what was paying them money. So it wasn't until the end of the year that strip phonograph had morphed into this. This is the first phonograph. As you can see, it's cylindrical shaped. It's got grooves built in, and what you did, you covered that in foil and spoke into it while you turned the What's-It, and then you rewound it and did it again, and it played it back. And forgive me, I'm just going to read, because basically what happened was, this was, by now it's towards the end of the year, so this was late November, and it worked first time. He did Mary Had a Little Lamb, famously, is what he tested it with. And it worked first time, and he was always very suspicious of inventions that work first time. Anyway, he took it into Scientific American, and this is the article that resulted. Mr. Thomas Edison recently came into this office, placed a little machine on our desk, turned a crank, and the machine inquired as to our health, asked how we liked the phonograph, informed us that it was very well, and bid us a cordial good night. Anyway, so that's what they did, and it made headlines across the world. The Wizard of Menlo Park, as he was very occasionally called, had done it again. And so the tinfoil phonograph, by now actually slightly improved, went on tour. That's it being shown in New York. That's it being shown in Melbourne, Australia. And because tinfoil is not an ideal substance to record sound on, very few recordings from this period, in fact, basically none, survive. Because obviously tinfoil, once you'd successfully worked it, you played it once, played it twice, it wore out. And of course, removing the tinfoil more or less always destroyed the recording. This is one of the very rare survivals. This is from 1878, and thanks to the first Sounds.org collective of scientists in America, they've managed to recreate, using 3D scanning technology. Anyway, I'll shut up. We can hear it. So this is basically what one of those demonstrations would have sounded like. So there you go. You play a trumpet, you make silly noises, and then you play it back, and the audience go, oh, wow. So in the 1870s, it came to this part of the world, first appearing in Brighton in June 1878. And I thought as I was coming here, I'd sort of see, when did it first come here? And annoyingly, it didn't. But in the Hastings and St Leonard's Observer in September 1878, basically this is a piece saying, the phonograph has been in Brighton. Can someone please bring it here? Because we've got some local dignitaries who love the sound of their own voice. So what they could do is that they could just record themselves, and when they get tired of talking, they can just carry on going. So it wasn't until a couple of years later that the phonograph did finally arrive. Hastings and St Leonard's Observer, November 1881. Where there was basically a Swiss village. This was all part of a health congress that was going on up near Warrior Square. And a great novelty, the phonograph was exhibited in a separate room for the first time in Hastings or St Leonard's, and was explained by an operator from the London Stereo. By this wonderful scientific instrument, every inflection of the human voice in speech or song can be preserved and reproduced. So isn't that exciting? That is the first time that any sound in this part of the world was recorded and played back, which I think is rather cool. Now, as I said, the tinfoil phonograph was essentially not very good, and everyone assumed in the aftermath of its invention that Edison would make it better. But he didn't. He was distracted by making light bulbs, which is his next big project and would be really profitable. So he just forgot about the phonograph, and into that void stepped Alexander Graham Bell, who by all accounts was quite annoyed that he hadn't come up with the phonograph first, and he set up a laboratory in Washington, D.C. with his beardy cousin, Chichester Bell, and this lovely American who was a maker of scientific instruments called Charles Sumner Tainter. I say he's lovely just because he sounds like he was really lovely. He was really abstemious, he loved tea, he used to hug himself when he recorded something really well. Anyway, from about 1880 to 1885, they just tried almost every conceivable method of recording sound. And they made long strip-shaped records, they made cylindrical records, they made the earliest surviving disc-shaped records. They made them out of glass, metal, card, wax, and they used electricity, magnetism, light. And some of their discs were so experimental, they couldn't have heard them themselves. But again, thanks to the wonderful firstsounds.org, we can put our ear to the door of their laboratory and listen to them messing around. Because think about it, if you're just trying out a new method for recording sound, just being able to visually see that some sound waves have been left is a successful experiment without the ability to necessarily play them back. Anyway, we're going to hear some. They do a lot of, and they do a lot of, how's this for high? And saying certain words really loudly, because they were testing about how well it would work as a means of business. So there's lots of just reading out numbers for, it's really boring. Anyway, let's hear it. And this one's a really strange one. This is just someone saying barometer over and over again. Barometer. I don't have it, but there's another one where they say potato over and over again. Now this is my favourite because I'm really puerile and immature, because this has got a swear word on it. So it's the earliest recorded swear word, and it's this one's from 1885, I think. And basically, I'm going to tell you what it sounds like because it's really hard to understand. So I'll describe it to you, and that will help you interpret the sounds. First, you just hear some sort of loud sounds, and it's someone saying the date and the name of who's making the record. Then he'll say, how's this for high? That's right. Then he'll go into Mary Had a Little Lamb. And after a little bit, something evidently goes wrong. They either think that perhaps he could see that the machine was about to break, or perhaps he had an agreed script and had got it wrong. But either way, he goes, and he says an F-bomb. So that's what to listen out for, and then it carries on. So shall we try and hear it? I didn't hear it at first. I didn't really believe it was there, but let's see. Isn't that good? I always say this, but whether it's actually an F-bomb or not, it's certainly human vexation, which is lovely. Anyway, so after 5 years of spending loads of money on all these weird ways of recording sound, they came up with this, which basically looks like the phonograph, and they called it the graphophone. And they covered it in, it was better than the original phonograph because it played narrow card cylinders covered in wax, and they kind of worked quite well. So this was the first sort of moderately successful, useful thing. But its main sort of impact really was that it really annoyed Edison. And so he came back into the fray. And so that's him in 1878 with his tinfoil phonograph. That's him about a decade later with the perfected phonograph. It's now battery operated, that's what that big thing is, and it now plays cylinders made of solid wax, not card-covered wax. And basically this went on tour, just as the tinfoil had before it. Not just one, I mean, they started making, and these were the first successful phonographs. And this brings us to my favourite of these early recordings. Now, the man seated there with his hand resting on the sort of trumpety bit is a man called Colonel Giroux, and he was Edison's sort of cheerleader. He was really good at generating column inches. He based himself in London, and any invention that Edison had, he was really good at telling people about it, and he was particularly obsessed with the phonograph and did loads of quite fascinating things with it. But one of the things he did was, in July 1888, is he took it to the Crystal Palace, which was obviously still there at the time, and it was the Handel bicentenary. So there was a performance of Israel in Egypt, I think it is, and he came up to the press gallery, set up the perfected phonograph with the batteries and all the spare cylinders there, and recorded it, and we're about to hear it. Now, the sound is awful by modern standards, but it's one of my favourites from these early ones, just because you can hear that somewhere in it there's something very beautiful going on. Even though it doesn't sound good, you can hear just about that it's there. And so for me, it's like putting your ear to the door of the past or something. When I was writing the book that inspired all this, this was the one I would go and listen to when I was feeling a bit flat, when I was having a crisis of confidence, because it's just so... Oh, shut up. Anyway, there you go. It's kind of mind-blowing, isn't it? So the phonograph, as I say, just like the tinfoil one, the perfected phonograph also went on tour, and it came to Hastings and St Leonard's, and this is from the Observer, May 1889, and I can't quite read it. Charles R. Statler, the first Monday of the evening, second night. He commenced by speaking, laughing, crowing, coughing, shouting, and quacking like a duck into the transmitter, and having exhausted one of the wax tubes on which the sounds are recorded, proceeded to reproduce them, which was done by means of a trumpet, which magnified the sounds and brought them forth into the room. So there you go. There's someone showing off what the phonograph can do by recording himself quacking and then playing it back for the audience of Hastings and St Leonard's. And then it's strange that in May also, another talking machine came to Hastings and St Leonard's, this time in, whereabouts was it? No, this one's actually, that last one was St Leonard's, this one's actually in Hastings, and done by Professor Archibald. There he is. Several cylinders were put into the phonograph, and the following sounds were reproduced. A band playing Mr. Edison's Lab about 6 months ago, the first cornet in the Coldstream Guards Band, a post horn, an English Street Band. Now, the important thing here is, he's brought along some cylinders recorded with music, recorded elsewhere. So that makes him the first DJ to visit this part of the world. Isn't that cool? Lovely. Back to the... So that's... the birth of recorded sound has started. But it's still being pushed by Edison as a thing that should be used by businessmen. What he imagined was that stenographers would be put out of business, you'd dictate a letter direct into your phonograph, and then your secretary could type it up later, or you could just send this phonograph. And some people, this did work, it did take off, but it didn't make much money. And a whole load of companies that had formed in America to try and make a profit from this new gizmo weren't really managing it. And the only ones that were making money were sort of wily operators who put them in public places and street corners and had records of either some experimental records of music by Edison, or just went and recorded, church bells, the sea, birdsong, and then would charge people a nickel a go to listen to it, because obviously it was such a mind-blowing new bit of technology. And so Edison, although he didn't like it being used for music, was being hassled to say, we need more music content so we can make money. And this is known as the founding document of the recording industry. In that, as you can see, it's from 1889, and this is the earliest record of a program of recording music in order to profit by selling cylinders of music. Now, the reality was that their experiments in the Edison lab, people just kept, the different companies kept saying, can you send more, we need more polka, more Irish music, more opera, and Edison just got fed up and said, sod off, you can now start making your own music. And from then on, the first record company catalogs start to appear, and some of the first hit makers appear. That man, I always have a mental block with his name. It's Attlee. John York Attlee, yes. John York Attlee, he was a government clerk by day and a honey-voiced whistler by night. And he, so the important thing about in the limited sort of frequency range of this era of sound, not everything worked. Certain sounds didn't work. Certain instruments didn't work. But whistling worked. Brass bands worked. But this man had an enormous number of, sold bucket loads of records. And I'll just play you a little bit.
Mockingbird, whistled by Mr. John York Attlee, artistic whistler for the Columbia Phonograph Company of Washington, D.C., accompanied on the piano by Professor Geisberg.
Now, the crazy thing about this period is that there was no way of mass producing the records. So to sell 3 copies of that record, he had to perform it 3 times. And brass bands were really big at the time, and because of that, different slide. All right, that's not a brass band. No, that's another. I'll just play you his one as well. This is a man called George Johnson. He was the son of a freed slave. He was discovered on a New York street corner, and this was his biggest hit.
I got daddy over Harry. I got daddy over Harry.
It's just crazy to think, isn't it, that like your copy of the record would really be your copy of the record. Like everyone else's would be slightly different. But in fact, although it's true that there was no way of mass producing at this time, they did, in fact, they would set up like 3 recording horns at a time so they could produce them in groups of 3. Or with brass bands, that is a brass band, they would have like a wall of 10 so they could knock them out in batches of 10. But it's still a really, quite a, I can't think of a word. Thank you, yes. I did a talk the other week and I forgot the word for earthquake. It's just so embarrassing. I had to have help. But anyway, meanwhile, in hell, this is what Thomas Edison's crew were up to. This is the Thomas Edison talking doll, and we can listen to this as well. Sleep well. Anyway, that was just a little aside. So the cylinders were in business. That was the sort of dominant format. But a lovely German named Emil Berliner thought that records, disc-shaped records, as we've seen, they had already been tried, But he thought they would be, he had figured out a way that you could make a single recording and then stamp loads of copies, so therefore it was much easier to make a profit. Even though these first ones, which were played on hardened rubber, didn't sound very good. This was the first commercially available disc-shaped records. They were designed for children, and we can listen to this man. You'll hear he's got a German accent, because most people think this is Emil Berliner himself.
Old King Saul was a merry old soul, and the merry old soul was he. He dwelt in a den with 4 merry men who left till they couldn't see. They left, ha ha, they left, ho ho, they left, ho ho, ho ho, they left till the tribe I thought.
Yes, all right, Emil, thank you. But the sound quality is so bad, that's why they had to print the words on the back so people knew what was being said. But that was when it was hardened rubber. They moved to shellac, which became the what records were made out for several generations after. Anyway, he launched Gramophone, was the name of his company, and then that came across the pond to this country, where that man there, Fred Gaisberg, helped set up the first recording studio in Maiden Lane near Covent Garden, and that's it there on the right. And he became incredibly skillful at bullying people to record before horns, because not everyone wanted to. And one of his most famous sort of scalps was Enrico Caruso. So we've jumped to 1902 now, and he went to see Enrico Caruso, and the legend has it that he paid him, he said how much to perform 10 songs. Enrico Caruso's people said £100, which as you can imagine was shed loads, and he wired his bosses and said, this is how much. They said, on no account pay that, that's ridiculous. And so Fred Gaisberg paid out of his own pocket because he just was sure it'd be successful. And we're about to hear a bit, and it just shows how far recording had come in quite a short period of time, in that this is the 6th thing he recorded in 1902 in a hotel room in Milan. And I always use this example, A, because it's beautiful, but B, because you hear he comes in a beat too early. You hear a piano giving him the key, and then he goes a bit too early, but they didn't worry about it, just they let it stay, and it was a huge hit, like, yeah, sold bucket loads, but... Normally fades out. Sorry, it was a bit abrupt. It's nice, isn't it? So I'm coming to the end now. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, just the one thing about that to bear in mind is there's no electricity involved with that. As in, there was electricity to revolve the machine that was recording, but the actual sound waves are recorded acoustically or mechanically. So there's nothing between his voice and the wax that it's recorded in. And I just think that's amazing to think that it's all mechanical means, because they didn't start using microphones till 1925, which is when the age of the crooner came in. But yeah, I just think it's an amazing thing to keep in mind. Now, so, and last of all, I'm going local again. Record dealers had started up, and as you can see, sandwiched between pheasant breeders and photo engravers, Sussex in 1905 had several. One in Blatchington Road, Hove, another one in Hove, and the lovely R. Sargood Williams. Now, I looked up his name because it's quite an unusual name. Where is it? Where have I got it? Yes, here it is. Ripon Sargood Williams. He had a place in Hastings and St Leonard's, but he was listed elsewhere in the same directory as a gramophone merchant. Now, gramophone means disc-shape. So this is the first disc-shaped record salesman. And what's rather cool, you can see he's got 2 places, one Wellington Place, Hastings, and 16 London Road, St Leonard's. 16 London Road, St Leonard's. We could basically drill through a couple of walls and we'd be in his place. It's now the St Leonard pub. And so I just thought that's kind of cool. And on that bombshell... No. I forgot. One last thing. I said this was all about the first time human beings recorded and played back sound, but it wasn't the first time it had ever been just recorded and not played back. There was a lovely Frenchman who in the late 1850s invented this. It's called the phonautograph, yes. And he didn't ever intend it to replay sound. He just used it as a means of recording sound by you speak into that thing, and then a little boar's bristle there traces the sound waves on lamp-blacked paper. And this is part of his phonautograms, as he called them, where these are the sound waves, and he's underneath transcribed what he said. With practice, we might learn to, almost be able to read sound waves. Like he called it a natural calligraphy. And obviously it wasn't true, but it was still a very successful piece of apparatus that furthered our knowledge of sound waves. But then the first Sounds.org crew in 2008 managed to resurrect the sound from these phonautograms, leading to this memorable moment from Radio 4's Today programme.
American historians have discovered what they think is the earliest recording of the human voice, made on a device which scratched sound waves onto paper blackened by smoke. It was made in 1860, 17 years before Thomas Edison first demonstrated the gramophone, and featured an excerpt from a French song, Au clair de la lune.
At this point, someone said into her ear, "It sounds like a bee in a bottle."
The award-winning screenwriter Abby Mann has died at the age of 80. He won an Academy Award in 1961 for Judgment at Nuremberg. Abby Mann also won several Emmys, including one in 1973 for a film which featured a police detective called... the character on whom a long-running TV series was eventually based.
It's 10 minutes past 8.
Thank you, everyone.
Brilliant. Jonathan Scott, wasn't that fabulous?
Thank you.